Hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our show. I'm Ray.
And I'm Crystal, and we are students of astrology, candidly musing every week on what's new.
For those just joining us, we're going to be going over the transits and kind of talk about our experiences and the themes that we're seeing with them.
And going forward, we will be recording and releasing bi weekly on Saturday. Today's episode is dedicated to catching up on the last month that we've missed.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a special episode. Normally we talk about things that are ahead, but this one we're kind of catching up. I can't believe it's only been 1 week already. Just kidding. So yeah, follow along to learn with us.
Yes. So, Ray, how are you doing this week?
Um, I'm doing really well. It's been really interesting. I'm doing really good. It's been like everything is kind of falling into place, and a lot of like long-term things it feels like are coming to completion. And there's seeds I feel like I've been planting and cultivating for a long time that are starting to bear fruit.
Mhm.
So I'm really excited about that, this included, to be honest. So yeah, how have you been?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I've just been like healing a lot and like learning a lot about myself more than I ever would have imagined I could squeeze into the last 2 months of the year. But yeah, I already feel like so different than even I did like 2 months ago. So it's been an insane roller coaster ride. And it's also getting colder here. So like I'm having my first real winter like in New York, but also like almost ever-ish in a way because I used to like when I used to live in college in Missouri, I was still driving. So I'm actually braving the cold more by walking everywhere. So it's been
You
a
went to
great
school in Missouri?
seasonal change. Hmm?
You went to school in Missouri? Sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt.
I went to college in Missouri. I went to University of Missouri.
Oh, I didn't know that. That seems so random.
That's why I love Ohio. That's why I'm like, yes, I love the Midwest. I know where that is for some reason. Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so today on this episode, we'll be recapping the transits from the week of November 20th until now, with an emphasis and highlight on the ones that are still actively influencing the energy at the moment. And any transits that we haven't covered are going to be listed in our show description. So a lot of these are squares, trines, etc. But the major ones we'll be talking about in just a sec here.
Yeah. So there's a lot been going on in the last month. I think it's been a time where like everyone has been experiencing a lot of inevitable change, and along that come a lot of questions of um like how much influence you have over that change and how much of it is just meant to be.
Mhm.
And so it feels like we're dealing with a lot of that. Some themes I noticed, at least astrologically, were kind of like boundaries are only helpful when they're needed. And so what's enjoyable or logical might not be the basis for what's right or wrong or for even what's helpful. Because sometimes a helpful boundary is a looser boundary and something that allows you more freedom. Um,
Mhm.
and sometimes it needs to be tighter. And so kind of balancing that active tension of how close do you want to hold things, how close is too close, and um, yeah, and along with inevitable change, like new beginnings often start from the ashes, which means something has to die. And so there's been a lot of death. And so I think a lot of when I was talking about things coming to completion, part of that is because of other things dying and making room for other things to grow. So yeah, I've been working with a metaphor to kind of cope with all of the change recently. Um, it's been super helpful, and it's been just kind of like my life as a garden. And whenever I had a pretty stressful experience with someone, and I felt like I lost a lot of trust for a minute with them. And so it felt like that part of, that section of garden that resembled my relationship with this person, part of it felt like was uprooted. Like there was a really pretty rose bush there, and it just got burned down. And we had to retill the soil and fertilize it and make sure it was ready to grow something else. And then I have this awesome garden, but then it's like this just barren spot where a death had occurred. Um, as you know, a symbolic part of our relationship. And then just kind of recognizing, using the daylight to recognize the rest of the garden, to really see, you know, how healthy is the garden doing overall? Are there any other plants that need uprooted? What needs work? And then actually going in with this person and discussing this conflict, and um, just being really honest with each other, and you know, speaking as if we don't have anything to lose, because we already reached a point where we felt like we lost a lot. So we were able to be really honest with each other. And ever since then, it's been really amazing because I don't know, our relationship grew. And so we've been able to plant new things in that place. And we have a new plant growing. And in addition to that, all of the other plants that we already had that were generally pretty healthy are getting some extra attention and
Mhm.
some extra care. Yeah, it was just one of those situations that felt impossible at first. You know, how can you trust someone moving forward, and this and that? But just using that metaphor, and you know, along with therapy and other modalities of help.
No, that makes total sense. I feel like I haven't had the same experience of someone breaking my trust, but I have definitely been reevaluating like what does trust mean to me, and like how am I processing like certain betrayals of trust that I've had, even like within the last like year or so, with like some people that I realized, because I'm no longer in contact with them and in contact with much better people, I realized how much I'd been suppressing this anger towards certain people that like I felt disrespected me, even though I knew it wasn't their fault, it was their
Uh,
responsibility. And I do feel like this is where yeah, some of the themes of like evaluating boundaries and understanding like when they become walls and when they're actually super needed. And it's not just externally, but also internally, because I was externally not talking to them, but internally I still wondered and guilted myself over things. And being able to come to a compassionate like understanding that didn't villainize either person is a very essential part, like part of that. Like, right, I like what you said about like kind of like the idea that there's no like right or wrong, but that it's just really important to like just look at it like everyone's gardening and everyone has responsibility for growing their fruit, because it's like a two-way collaboration. If the fruit like is cultivated by both people, then it belongs to both people. So I really like the idea of boundaries as a garden as opposed to like a barrier or wall or something, because I feel like when we think of it as a collaborative effort, it's much better. And this person, actually, funny enough, like one person in my life I'm still working on forgiving, like to talk about emotions as a plant between us. But I also was like, but you aren't actually guarding your individual plant as a person. You're too busy paying into this plant to where you're actually suffocating it, or like letting me down because you won't like regulate yourself in the way that I actually need you to. And so processing that was actually really important for me, because I was realizing how, in many ways, I had clung to the narrative that everyone else gives more than me, when that's not true. I give more than a lot of people in some ways too. So it has to be both ways where we check ourselves.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so maybe we can hop right into talking a bit about like how this relates to key transits that we have outlined, because yeah, there are still some active transits that were found in the previous weeks that we didn't mention. And so in this episode we can recap that. Do you want to like go ahead and name a couple of them?
Um, yeah, definitely. Um, so I think kind of a good imagery to keep in mind with this, as we're looking at the transits, is just the sun's journey through the signs, because it's been about a month almost, and so that is about a month's time for the sign, you know, the sun to enter a different sign. So the first notable transit that we wanted to talk about is the sun entering Sagittarius, which happened on November 22nd. which is very notable because on the 23rd, Jupiter stationed direct, which is the ruler of Sagittarius, while it was in Pisces. And we also had a new moon on the same day, the 23rd of November in Sagittarius. So there's already this idea of like a new beginning and a new start to something in a very hopeful manner. Jupiter's a benefic planet. It's nice, it's pleasant, it produces good things. It produces things that grow over time. And I think the Scorpio season, it felt like a lot of things are being ripped away from us. Like things are being uprooted. Like maybe there was a storm in the garden and it was just that weather. And now the weather was clearing up a little bit. The sun went into Sagittarius, Jupiter went direct, and we're still on the same land. Like we're still in the aftermath of a storm, but we can start doing that work of preparing the soil and really cultivating it, which is kind of a good transition into the rest of the month, since the next month includes a full moon. But Crystal can kind of tell us about those
Yeah,
transits.
so that was in November. But yeah, we had Mercury enter Capricorn December 6th, which was a week ago. And then we had a full moon in Gemini right after that on December 7th. And then we had Venus and squaring Jupiter and entering Capricorn on December 9th. And this is all in anticipation for basically the sun to enter Capricorn. We're about like a little over a week out from that. But yeah, a lot of this month was about this theme of Sagittarius and freedom and higher learning dominating it. But then like now we have also these ingresses into Capricorn, which is all about practical implementation of the Sagittarian inspiration, the spark of joy, the spark of wonder and curiosity. And Capricorn's kind of like, okay, what are you going to do about that? How do you take actionable ways to honor that inspiration? As Sagittarius is a Jupiter ruled sign, Capricorn's a Saturn ruled sign. So I think of this like Jupiter is desiring to like expand and Saturn is desiring to constrict, which is funny because we talk about this theme of boundaries as okay, expand, aka like don't completely shut everyone out, but also constrict as in be selective about like what you're going to do, like to limit things as well, but you can't really like not have both. I think of it as it goes hand in hand, and people tend to over index on either expansion or restriction. They don't realize that you have to kind of hold the two paradoxically together. I always
Like a
think about
slow
how it's like,
over time.
huh? Go ahead.
Like a slow growth over time, it makes me think of.
Yes, exactly. It's kind of like kind of you gotta like bob back and forth as you wobble up the hill. And I like to think of it as like my kindness is a privilege, not a right. I can be really nice, but I will also instantly shut you down if you disrespect me. But at the same time, if you disrespect me, I will quickly, move to go back to being open if you correct what you did wrong. And I think that most people need to know that there needs to be a flexibility of being able to sashay between the two in a very natural way. Just like how in conversation, if it's balanced, it's one person talks, one person listens, then the other person talks and the other person listens. So it's all about balancing as well. And as someone with both Sagittarius and Capricorn energy, I'm constantly fighting like the need to be practical, but also be inspired and optimistic enough to not be a total cynic.
Mm, yeah. Um, there was something you said that made me think of the thema mundi. Um,
Ooh, please say more.
it's something we always go back to over and over. I can actually share my screen so anyone watching can look at it. Oh, maybe not. I need to be the host or have permission, I think.
Here, let me give you permission. Okay,
But
you can share your screen now.
perfect. And if you're listening on something where you cannot see it visually, the thema mundi is a chart that has a Cancer rising, and it's was thought to kind of be like the birthplace of like the world, or like the first birth chart, especially with Cancer rising. So we won't get into too much of that, but what it made me think of, was with the ascendant and the descendant kind of works as the axis of the separation of above and below. And you have that with Jupiter and with, well, with Jupiter, with Pisces and with Sag, where one is right above and one is right below, and Saturn being that dark period. And it almost gives Jupiter, like part of why it's so, I don't know if inspirational is right the world is the right word, but like optimistic or hopeful, is because it's not just like one side of the coin of, oh, think everything is awesome. It also has to do with like, I lost everything or I went into the underworld and then I have nothing to lose now. And so I'm going to build, anything, all my imagination of what I can build is completely unrestricted because there's nothing to lose. There's only things to gain. And Jupiter is very much of that mentality. And so sometimes that's just like unfiltered optimism. And then other times it's the result of something being lost and it being almost like a redemption.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I really feel like my life has been literally sashaying between the underworld and the the world outside, which is funny because winter is my favorite season, because you get all cozy and burrowed inside. But I also feel immense joy when I see winter ebbing into spring, which I never
Hmm.
really thought about until I was older. But yeah, that's really inspiring to think about in terms of the underworld because people are resistant to it, which is why also people like tend to not like winter. But I feel like it's really important to like think about what winter is a gift as. Also, because Sagittarius is a, at least here in the West here, it's like a winter sign when the sun is in Sag. So it's like, oh, like even though we're hibernating and bundling up, we're also inspired at the same time. And you think about all the holidays, like where people have Christmas and they're meeting their families, or there's Hanukkah and like all these things, like people are more connected to even when it's cold out and even when it might seem barren. So that's what I like to think about as well, like the kind of paradox of like you can feel the most inspired when it's like the most desolate seeming, right?
Yeah, like you feel the most connected with other people when you feel the most alone.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I think winter is definitely a time of it can be like an isolating time sometimes, especially as it gets colder, especially if you live where it snows or somewhere crazy like New York. Fun fact, I don't know if I've told you this before. I've been to New York a few times actually.
I thought you hadn't really been here.
It was when I was young. I don't remember a lot, but my mom's birthday is actually on New Year's, and so we would
Uh,
go for the ball drop.
oh gosh, the ball drop. Yeah, I plan on spending future holidays here in my home in New York because I really think northeastern winters are, yes, more cold, but more glam and real. And I like the harsh wind here. So yeah, my whole thing is like being in winter and kind of like braving the cold to go do errands, but also being warm inside and snuggly and like
Hmm.
having seasonal change is something I definitely was craving after I lived in LA for like 5 years. And not a moment have I been like, I want to go back to LA since I've been here, even when the weather's been so extreme. I do think how like it's because I feel inherently more respected by the land here in a specific way. And I feel more like lit up. Like it's very interesting. And New York has more of a Capricorn energy. And I feel like in LA, it was like it was a fire moon, the city of LA. And I was
Yeah.
more at home in a Sag and Leo way, but here I used to be a Capricorn. And it's never been more clear as to when it's Sag and Capricorn season now, which is probably also why I feel like I'm thriving.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Not only do we see different parts of ourselves in different locations and different environments, but also in different seasons too. And
Mhm.
the combination and the dance between those things is just endless possibilities.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting because right now, like Mercury and Venus are in Capricorn. Um, and I think with Mercury being in Capricorn, it reminds me of like, let's get down to business so we can close up for the year. So we can reopen our doors more when Mercury enters like Aquarius, which is like all about community and society and like a greater purpose. So it's kind of like, what are you going to do about it? So then you can help society, right? The journey of like the science continues. Um, and also Venus being in Capricorn is also like how to be practical, which is kind of funny because like people are doing their holiday shopping right now, and if Venus is in Capricorn, I'm pretty sure people are hopefully going to be intentional about what they're buying, or learn if they're not intentional the consequences of such a thing. So I really like that like kind of playful interplay that I think about a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, you made me just realize this is so hilarious for multiple reasons. I'm only gonna list two of them, but you mentioned Mercury's in Capricorn. This reminded me that it's conjunct my midheaven right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's sexy.
And my natal Jupiter.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and it's the day that we're recording our recap episode. And also yesterday I had a meeting with someone local to discuss being like an in-house astrologer or teaching classes there, and that being kind of a touch point for my practice. And so I thought that was super interesting. I was like, wow, this is like that's it, this is very literal. But especially with
Yeah.
Mercury and wow, literally recording a podcast.
I
um,
love it. Yes. And yeah, well, actually, Ray, I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts on Sag and Cap? Because I've been talking a lot because they are in my big three, so it's a very different sort of vibe, but I wonder what it's like for you.
yeah, I have a really good, really good, I think, um, example to use for the transits and also the concept of angular houses, or angular.
Oh, yes.
Um,
Great time.
yeah, lesson time, little learning moment. So the angular triads are like you have the ascendant, you have the descendant, the midheaven, and the icy or the nadir. People call it different things. It's the same thing. It's the bottom of the chart. Um, the ascendant and the descendant, that's like the horizon. That's left and right. That's the ground, and it separates above and below. And then you have the midheaven at the top. That's when the sun's at its highest, and that's when people are out doing activities during the day. That's when they have the most visibility to do it, what they're known for, and that's why the midheaven represents like your career and literally just things that you're known for. So with the concept of the triads, you read them as if the sign before the angle is something that kind of can contribute to it,
Mhm.
and also take you away from it at the same time. So, for example, in this case, the ninth house, especially with Sagittarius, for me, that is my education. That's my literal higher learning. I'm literally in a course right now. I've taken courses before, I've mentored before, and the ninth house is the accumulation of all of the education that I put in that I invested.
Mm.
Um, and so it's all the skills that I learned, it's all of that, and it's contributing to the 10th house, but it's also taking me away from it at the same time, because then it's an awkward form of growth. And then you get imposter syndrome when you're still learning. And it's just this whole thing. So then the 10th house itself is, I had that meeting today. I met with a group of people. We talked about, what the local interest in astrology is like, what kind of interest they're in. Um, and it was very planning and it was very business and um yeah, it very literal. I just realized Venus is there too, and that rules my seventh house, and Ty was with me talking about the same thing,
Mhm.
um which is also has the business partners too,
That's
so
so
it's just
funny. Yeah.
realized.
And you're interested in like teaching astrology more, which we will definitely be pushing. Like not just in that capacity, but in other capacities. Which I think is really cool. I learn a lot from you when I speak to you. And yeah, I'm realizing that like I didn't actually think too hard about the fact that it's in my first and second house at the moment. And like, okay, actually no, I thought, oh, it's my first and second house, but I like didn't actually think too much about like what in my life applies to that. And I'm thinking now, like, I'm like, oh shoot, like there's this whole identity crisis I've been going through, but it's like more like what I somatically thought my identity was as a child, like this abandoned loner, that reject freak no one liked. And now I don't feel that way. I'm learning I have value. And when I like put myself on the map and trust my value, it like illuminates and stuff like that. So it's actually really interesting to hear you talk about the ninth and the 10th house for you. Cause like I see this like kind of relationship of like the second is getting catalyzed sort of by the activity of the first, and like the more
Mhm.
I shift my identity around like clinging to this idea that I suck or whatnot, the more that second house gets activated. So it's like the more you learn, it seems to me like the more zest you have to be sharing that to people in your public image MC way. Because yeah, at a certain point you learn so much that even though you're really introverted, you can't help but like start to want to share. For me, it's like almost the opposite, where as a natural extrovert, I'm seeing more and more like I need to introvert a little bit more. And I'm like feeling like the desire organically begin to like rise up as I get more centered in that. So I think it's actually really interesting that you're like preparing to be more seen, and that I have been like being like, should I be more seen? Da, da, da. I'm like, no, no, no. I want to do more inner work in a certain way and not pressure myself, because it's actually more about for me the process and the production at the moment. But you're like, I got this base down of knowledge. Now I'm gonna launch it into the ether and like let people know who I am and see me. And I'm like, I love this for both of us. We are like, going towards each other on the spectrum, I suppose, of comfortability with like, I guess, public versus private lives. Because I realized I'm much, much more private and like guarded and cautious. I knew that in theory, but I'm realizing in practice, I'm actually expending way more energy than I actually have available. And I didn't realize how much that was true. And I think you're realizing I want to be doing more collabs and around more people and like even more like fireworksy than I am now. I'm seeing like this catalyst between first house, second house, transition, identity to implementing those values, and sparking inspiration to publicly putting it out there. So I'm really excited then for the house that will come after that. For you, the 11th house, for me, the third house. So yeah, it's going to be pretty intense. And Mercury and Venus always come in a pair, it seems like. When it comes to like inspiration and like verbalizing that and values and what we do about that.
Yeah, I think it's Mercury and Venus traveling about the same speed of the sun is a good reminder that curiosity and pleasure and enjoying things are vital to our well-being and our ability to shine light. Um, but yeah, I was thinking of the example I was talking about earlier with the angular triads and like things that kind of take you away from it, but also bring you towards it.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be like the 12th or the 9th, but the 11th. So in my case, with this work example, the 10th house would be like the building itself and the work relationships there, but then teaching classes, and the classes would almost be like an 11th house thing. And getting in the community in the 11th house being things that uh contribute back to the 10th. And so like with the second, it would be investing in things that bring you back to the first. Like food is a good example, because literally the way you eat is going to affect your body. But
Yeah.
it's over time.
Yeah.
Uh,
I love thinking about these things as a journey. It really is really great that way.
yeah. So definitely, I think a time of there was a big storm, tore up some of our gardens, and it's up to us to just kind of accept what happened and kind of move forward and decide what we want to plant when we're ready to start planting again.
Yeah, well, sounds like this winter is going to be quite fruitful. I'm almost going to miss it. No, I'm definitely going to miss it, but I'll be excited for when spring's here too. But yeah.
Fruity winter.
Mhm. Yeah, for any other transits, because we did have some other ones like sextiles, oppositions, and squares, you can find them linked in the description below on YouTube and on Spotify. So yeah, and once again, we'll be recording bi-weekly, so you can find those episodes that will be coming up every other week on Saturday. So yeah. Thank you for hanging out with us today. If you're interested in finding out more about us, you can find information on my work at crystal-duan.com or at crystalxduan on Instagram and Twitter. There's the links in the description as well. And Ray also has some great things cooking up on their end.
Yeah, I do something called star therapy. And if you want to know more about that, you can find me on Instagram at Ray of Light Astro. And that's Ray with an E, like my name. Or Ray of Light Astrology on Facebook.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in, guys, and have a nice week.